Ava had always loved the evening shift at Poppy's cafe. It was the calm before the storm, a time when the world outside slowed down and everything inside the cafe settled into its familiar rhythm. Poppy's wasn't much, just a small, cozy place tucked away in a quiet corner of town. AV's shift had just begun, and already the usual hum of conversation filled the air. She had everything under control. The evening was winding down, the last few regulars sipping their coffee as Ava moved between the tables, clearing dishes and wiping counters. She glanced at the clock, just 15 more minutes, and she could close up for the night. The cafe had its usual end-of-shift calm, and Ava was already mentally planning her way home when the door chimes rang, cutting through the stillness. At first, she didn't think much of it. New customers sometimes wandered in late, though it was rare. But then, the figure that walked through the door caught her eye, and for a second, she almost thought she was imagining it. There he was, Elon Musk. He strolled into Poppy's like he was stepping into any ordinary cafe, looking slightly tired, but unmistakably him. His presence, even without him saying a word, commanded attention. Ava froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. She had seen him on TV, in interviews, and across social media countless times. But now, seeing him in the flesh, standing just feet away, it felt unreal. The soft murmur of the cafe suddenly felt louder, as if everyone in the room was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Ava's mind raced for a split second, but then she snapped herself back to reality. "Don't make it weird," she reminded herself. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and gathered herself. She wasn't going to be one of those star-struck employees who treated him differently just because of his name. She was here to do her job, just like any other day. She walked over to his table, forcing her nerves to settle, and flashed him a friendly, warm smile. "Hi there. What can I get for you tonight?" Musk looked up from where he had been staring out the window, his eyes a little tired but still carrying that familiar intensity. "Just a coffee, Black, and maybe a slice of pie." "Whatever you've got," he said, in a calm, almost casual tone. Ava nodded, trying to sound casual herself. "Coming right up." As she turned to walk back to the counter, she could feel the eyes of the entire cafe on her, the buzz of curiosity hanging in the air. But she focused on her task, determined not to let the situation throw her off. One coffee, one slice of pie. She could handle that. Ava didn't quite understand why, pouring his coffee and plating a slice of apple pie, she reminded herself that he was just a customer. She wanted to give him the same friendly service she gave anyone else, even if he was, well, Elon Musk, returning to his table. She set down his order. "Thank you," he said. Taking a sip and glancing out the window again, he seemed preoccupied, perhaps thinking over something from his earlier meeting. Ava guessed he'd had a long day, and somehow she felt a bit of sick sympathy for him. Big shot or not, everyone needed a quiet place to unwind. Ava went back behind the counter, keeping herself busy while casting the occasional glance at Elon. She felt a mix of curiosity and admiration. He was an ambitious figure, always reaching for the impossible. But it seemed not everyone in the cafe shared her thoughts. Eventually, one of the older men, a regular named Frank, known for his unfiltered opinions, stood up and walked over to Elon's table. Ava watched nervously, unsure of what he was about to say. "Excuse me," Frank said, his voice gruff but loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "Aren't you? The guy who used to support OpenAI helped set it up. Didn't you?" Elon looked up, pausing, and said yes. "I was involved in the early days." He replied calmly. Frank crossed his arms, a skeptical look crossing his face. "So why do you sew them, and now from what I hear you're making your own AI thing?" "Just like them. Isn't that a bit contradictory?" Elon sighed, setting his coffee cup down. I have concerns about the direction OpenAI is heading. I believe AI should be aligned with truth and not biased by hidden motives. That's why I started XI. I wanted to build something transparent, something more focused on facts. Sure, Frank scoffed, you're just looking out for yourself what you didn't get the control you wanted. So now you're making your own AI more money. More power isn't that it's a few murmurs of agreement. Rose from the other tables, Elon's expression didn't change, but Ava noticed a slight tension in his posture. It was a different side of him, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. He was no stranger to criticism. She figured he was used to it, maybe even expected it, but something about hearing it in this small, intimate space seemed to hit differently. Actually, no, it's not about power or profit. Musk replied, his tone measured. It's about accountability. AI is one of the most powerful tools we have. I don't want to look back and see that I didn't do everything I could to keep it in check. AVA watched, the exchange feeling a pang of unease. She'd been thrilled to serve someone as famous as Elon, and yet the others seemed almost hostile. Whispers spread, a few people shaking their heads. Some of them clearly didn't believe him, seeing his actions. As self-serving AVA heart felt heavy as she stood behind the counter, listening to people criticize Elon Musk with increasing hostility. The way they looked at him, the accusations through it, didn't sit right with her. She'd seen Elon as a symbol of progress, someone who didn't just talk about change, but actively worked to make it happen. And yes, he was controversial, but what visionary wasn't? Finally, she couldn't hold back anymore. She walked over to Frank's table, clearing her throat as she spoke up, her voice steady, but her nerves running wild. Look, I know not everyone agrees with what he's doing, but you can't just dismiss him as selfish, AVA said, glancing around at the regulars who are now watching her intently. This is a guy who's not only invested in space and tech, but also has a foundation that supports hospitals and sick kids. I've read about it. And when it comes to AI, well, technology moves forward whether we like it or not. The fact that he's trying to make something safer, more transparent, that's worth something, don't you think? Her words seemed to catch Elon's attention. He looked at her, a glimmer of surprise and perhaps even appreciation. In his eyes, she realized he hadn't expected anyone to stand up for him. Especially not a waitress in a small, unassuming cafe like this. AVA continued gaining momentum. Just because he's trying to improve on something that already exists doesn't mean he's only in it for the money. I mean, isn't that what innovation is about, finding ways to make things better? The room went silent for a moment. Some people seemed taken aback, while others still wore skeptical expressions. Ava had known these folks for years, served them their coffee, and Pi laughed at their jokes and listened to their stories. But tonight, it felt like she was suddenly an outsider. Then her boss, Mr. Smith, walked in from the back, frowning as he saw the scene unfolding. He looked from Ava to the other customers, his expression growing more serious. AVA. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone clipped. She hesitated, swallowing hard. "I was just defending Mr. Musk," she said, her voice softer now, but still carrying a hint of defiance. Mr. Smith's frown deepened. He glanced around at the regulars, some of whom were nodding in disapproval, and shook his head. "Jada, I appreciate your passion, but our regulars are the backbone of this place. We can't have you arguing with them over any customer, celebrity or not." "But Mr. Smith, I wasn't arguing, I was just—" He held up a hand, cutting her off. "I've made up my mind. I think it's best if we find someone else to take your place. You can stay on for a few more days until I find a replacement." But after that, AVA heart sank. The cafe had been her safe place, her little sanctuary, where she knew the regulars and the rhythm of each day. She hadn't expected this to end up costing her job around her. A few customers chuckled, clearly entertained by the drama unfolding. She felt a sting of humiliation, her eyes welling up despite herself. She'd only been trying to defend someone she thought deserved a fair chance, but it had backfired in the worst way possible. Now her remaining days at the cafe would be filled with awkward glances, whispers, and the bitter taste of rejection. Elon, who had been listening quietly, stood up. He looked at Ava with a mix of gratitude and regret, sensing the trouble his presence had caused. "Thank you for standing up for me, AVA," he said, his voice gentle. "But I don't want to be the reason you lose your job. I'll head out now." AVA looked up at him, blinking back tears. She didn't know what to say, but at that moment she was grateful he understood. She gave him a small nod, her heart aching as he turned to leave. Musk walked out of the cafe, the bell above the door chiming once more as it closed behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, and Ava felt every set of eyes on her, the weight of their disapproval pressing down on her shoulders. This black waitress was fired for helping Elon Musk, but the next day she got the shock of her life when she came to work. The next day, Ava's heart wasn't in it. She walked into Poppy's cafe, feeling defeated, her eyes heavy from a restless night. The thought of having to find a new job weighed on her. But even more, she dreaded the knowing look she'd get from the regulars. Yesterday's incident still lingered fresh in her mind, being fired for standing up for someone she admired. It felt unfair. But here she was, trying to get through the day. As the lunch rush started to fade, the doorbell chimed. Ava barely glanced up from the coffee machine until she heard an excited whispering. She turned, her stomach flipping, when she saw Elon Musk standing in the doorway. A slight smile on his face, he scanned the room, gave a light nod to the curious onlookers, and then took the same table by the window he'd occupied the previous evening. The cafe went silent, everyone watching Mr. Smith. The cafe owner was there too, hovering nervously by the counter. Some of the regulars from the previous night glanced between Elon and Ava with thinly veiled curiosity, clearly wondering what Elon was doing back in their little cafe. Ava tried to keep her composure, but her hand shook slightly as she brought over his coffee and a slice of apple pie. She managed a polite smile as she set down the items, but she didn't linger. She wasn't sure why he was here again, but she didn't want to make any more waves. She busied herself with other tables, half expecting him to leave as quietly as he had the night before. But Elon stayed drinking his coffee, occasionally glancing in her direction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked up and caught her eye, gesturing for her to bring him the bill. Ava took a steadying breath, grabbing the card machine as she approached his table. As she reached him, she mustered her best professional smile, sliding his card into the machine. "Thanks for coming in again," she said quietly, still feeling self-conscious about yesterday. She felt everyone's eyes on her, watching intently, clearly curious about what would happen next. Elon met her gaze, his expression softening. "Ava, I just want to say thank you for standing up for me last night," he said, his voice low but sincere. "I know it cost you, and not everyone would have done that." Ava looked down, a small smile creeping onto her face. "I just said what I believed," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I don't think anyone deserves to be judged by one side of the story." Elon nodded thoughtfully, then leaned forward, glancing around, as if to make sure he had her attention. "You know, after I left here last night, I couldn't stop thinking about what you did. So I checked in with my team, and we'd love to have someone with your kind of heart and integrity on board." Ava felt her stomach twist with surprise, her hands freezing on the card machine. "What do you mean?" she asked, barely able to believe what she was hearing. Elon gave her an encouraging smile. "We have a foundation, and we're always in need of people who genuinely care and are good with others. If you're interested, we could use someone like you at the call center. It wouldn't be glamorous, but it'd be steady work. And who knows, it might even be the start of something bigger." Ava blinked, barely able to process his words. Her heart raced as she realized that he was offering her a job, an actual job, one that could take her in a new direction. She looked at him, trying to see if he was serious, but all she saw in his expression was sincerity. Ava swallowed, finally finding her voice. "I don't know what to say," she stammered, a smile breaking through the shock. Elon chuckled softly. "Just say yes, and we'll figure out the rest later." Without thinking, she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'd love to." She managed, her voice brimming with emotion. The regulars exchanged glances, some of them looking sheepish, while others simply watched in stunned silence. Ava couldn't help but smile as she handed Elon the card machine to finalize the payment. He entered his PIN and handed her a receipt. But she knew this was no ordinary transaction. As Elon got up to leave, he gave her a final nod. "See you soon, Ava. My team will be in touch." And with that, he walked out of Poppy's cafe, leaving behind a stunned silence and a very grateful waitress. Avia stood there, her heart pounding, as she realized that in defending someone she believed in, she hadn't just stood up for him, she'd opened the door to an unexpected, life-changing opportunity. What do you think motivated Avia to defend Elon Musk in the cafe, even though it cost her job? Do you think her actions were purely out of admiration, or was there something deeper? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.